It's just a picture of a peacock. I thought he was... Oh, never mind. This is Nervous System, Holes Anatomy, Chapter 10. Let's get started. First of all, how do we collect information? So, nervous system involves taking in outside information, sensory input, monitoring changes, these being stimuli as we call them, and then integrating that, so processing what that information means, and this is the brain for the most part. And then you decide what you're going to do with it. So you're going to have some motor output. You're going to respond to the stimulus. And this is using muscles or glands, basically. Now, how is the nervous system broken down? So we have the central nervous system, the CNS, which involves the brain and spinal cord. And then you have the penis, which is the nerves outside the brain and spinal cord. They emanate out from the spinal cord itself, and you see those here in pink. So this information that goes towards the brain we call the afferent division, or the sensory information, and they go from the peripheral nervous system, from the penis to the central nervous system. And then the motor output is the efferent and goes away from the central nervous system to the CNS. Away from the CNS through the penis to the various effectors. Now the motor division can be broken down into two subcategories. Okay, the somatic nervous system, which is voluntary, and these are your skeletal muscles that you choose to flex. And then the autonomic nervous system, which is involuntary. Of course, you don't get to choose what you do to that. And then the autonomic nervous system can be further broken down, and we'll get into more of that later, but here you see the autonomic nervous system is further subdivided into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems. And basically this is your fight or flight system that regulates all the things that you can't control consciously. So heart rate, how fast is it going, how fast are you breathing, whether you're sending blood flow to the digestive system and digesting, or peeing, or blah, blah, blah. That's your autonomic nervous system. All right, different tissue types or different cells that make up the nervous system. Now, the majority of much of the time spent talking on the nervous system is for neurons. Now, neurons are a very small percentage of the nervous system itself. The majority of cells in the nervous system are glial cells, or neuroglia, as you see this term here. And these are various supportive cells. Now, the first one to talk about is astrocytes. Astro, the term meaning not Astro the dog from the Jetsons, which unfortunately many of you don't know because you're too young to know the Jetsons. Great cartoon. Astrocytes are star-shaped cells, and they help to support and hold neurons in place. You can see here's an astrocyte. And these also form the blood-brain barrier. So they line or form the barrier between the blood flow through the capillaries and the neurons themselves, and create the blood-brain barrier, which is super tightly regulated and very few things can get in. And in this way, they control the chemical environment of the brain. Then we have microglia, which are spider-like phagocytes. Phagocytes, that just means they are immune system type cells that clean up debris by engulfing. They wrap themselves around it to kind of chew it all up. So microglia clean up the nervous system. The normal immune system doesn't have functioning in the CNS. So if any pathogen actually gets into the brain or spinal cord area, it's a very, very big problem because your immune system can't attack it. Microglia is the best option that you have there. Ependymal cells, these secrete CSF, or cerebrospinal fluid. Here you see the cells there with cilia there. This fluid-filled cavity, for example, is a sinus, and it might have various types of regions within the brain, and they'll have cerebrospinal fluid. This is the fluid that the brain and spinal cord are floating in, and that comes from these cells, in fact. The last few are oligodendrocytes. This is one of the more weird words. These ones produce myelin, but specifically they produce myelin in the CNS. Myelin is the wrapping of the neurons to help insulate and protect. That you can see here, it's the whitish stuff that's being pictured here. You can kind of see the wrapping there in that picture. And then Schwann cells, to jump here. Schwann cells also produce myelin, but they produce it in the penis, peripheral nervous system. And here you can see myelin. They look like the marshmallows on a string that go along. That makes me really hungry, even though I'm not hungry. And then you have satellite cells, which help to protect neuron cell bodies. You can see them enveloping and wrapping around the cell body and housing or protecting it. So there's a subset of our neuroglia. They make up 90% of the cells of the brain, whereas neurons play a very small role, although a very important role, as you know. Neurons, here we go. They make, you put a bunch of neurons together and you get a nerve. So just like we had many myofibers to create a fascicle and fascicles into a muscle, we also have many neurons lined up and side by side to create this bundle that is a nerve. And they transmit messages. That's their important thing. They have a cell body, sometimes called the soma, but this is basically like the nucleus, the mitochondria, the Golgi, and all that kind of stuff. That's very typical of a neuron, very typical of any cell, I should say. And then they have processes, which are things that stick out from the cell body. And these things include dendrites and axons that we'll talk about in just a bit. Here you see dendrites sticking out and the axon coming out. Now the cell body has a special substance that's a specialized rough ER, much like we saw a specialized rough ER in muscle cells. We also have a special rough ER in the nervous system, and that's called a Nissl substance. And then more on that later. And looks like we're freezing here. Okay. And then there's also a special type of cytoskeleton component called neurofibrils that help to keep the cell in its specific shape and structure. And then we also mentioned already the cell body. Here you have the dendrites. Dendrites collect the information and take it toward the cell body from all various kinds of regions. You notice dendrites are branched all over the place, so each one may synapse with a different neuron. So you may have 50 different neurons sending information to this one neuron, where a dendrite collects different ones. And they conduct impulses toward the cell body, whereas the one axon conducts impulses away from that cell body. And the axon is often the part that gets the most attention when we talk about neurons. So axons, at the very end of them, they may branch and end in what we call axon terminals, and in those terminals are small membrane sacs called vesicles, and inside those sacs are neurotransmitters. You may remember a discussion of calcium, and calcium being necessary in the axon terminal to cause the neurotransmitter to be released into the synapse. So at the end of the axon terminal, there's a gap, and that gap is called the synaptic gap or the synaptic cleft or the synapse. All of the above are fine. And the neurotransmitter has to pass across that to transmit the message. Now, we already mentioned myelin previously. In the penis, it's caused by Schwann cells, or made by Schwann cells. And this is kind of like electrical wiring that's metal, but it's wrapped in that plastic housing. And in fact, for the nervous system, it's not just for Schwann cells, and myelin is not just for protection, but it's mainly to speed up the message that is being sent. The more myelin that is wrapped around, the larger the diameter, the faster a message will be sent down that axon. And we'll talk about in the second lecture exactly how impulses travel down the axon. So you might notice, I'm going to jump back a couple pictures here. Yeah, so you'll notice that here this white stuff is myelin, but you'll notice it doesn't cover the entire thing. There's these little spaces or gaps, and these little spaces or gaps are called nodes of Ranvier. And the nodes of Ranvier are actually where the message is transmitted. It actually jumps over or around these segments of myelin that you can see. And that's what the nodes of Ranvier are. They are gaps in the myelin. And on that note, we're going to stop for part 1.